Welcome to object-oriented programming. In this video we're going to be working with a rectangle. We're going to solve for the perimeter, area, and diagonal. So first thing I'm going to do is include my libraries. I'm going to include IOStream. I am going to include IOmanip, and I'm going to include CMath. IOStream is for input and output commands. Then we have IOmanip, which is for alignment. It's a library of alignment commands. And then we have CMath, and that is just a library for math commands. So after that, we're gonna enter in using namespace std, and this just puts std : in front of all common commands. Common library commands. So now that we got this part, now since this is object oriented, we're going to put a lot of these commands into our header file. So let's create a header file. So you select header files, highlight add, and then click new item. We're going to select header file, and we're just going to call this C rectangle and click add. Okay, now let's create this header files. We're going to type class. It's going to turn blue, then rectangle. C rectangle, and then open twisty, closing twisty, semicolon. Then we're going to type in public and private. Now we're going to create the default constructor. Okay, so we're going to call this C rectangle, open parentheses, closing parentheses, open twisty, closing twisty, semicolon. So this is the default constructor. Okay, after we created that, now we're going to create the private member variables. So it's a rectangle, so we're going to have length and width. So we're going to write double. Okay, so double length and width. Now the reason we're using a double, because just in case, let's say you have a rectangle and it's not exactly an integer, so it's not 1, 2, 3. It's something like 1.675 or something like that. So now we are going to create our partial constructor. So we're going to call this C open paren double a close parentheses, closing parentheses. Now we're going to say length. So we're going to assign a to length. That's your first partial constructor. Let's create the second one. This is going to be the full constructor. This is going to be C rectangle double A, comma double B. This is going to be width. Well, let's call this length again. Assign that to A. We're going to have width, and assign B to width, or B to width. Partial constructor. This is your full constructor. It's full constructor because it's accessing all of your private member variables. Whoops, almost forgot to put a semicolon right there. Okay, so now we have the default constructor, the partial constructor, and the full constructor. Now let's go ahead and create the mutators. Mutators for length and width. So first one will be for length. So we're going to write double. No, we're not. Sorry. We're going to write void set length, open parentheses, closing parentheses, and then we're going to type in open twisty, closing twisty, and here we're going to say, we're going to write double A. And here we're going to assign A to length, just length equal sign A semicolon. So that is the mutator for length. Now we're going to do the mutator for width. So we're going to write void set width. It has to be exactly the same, otherwise it's not going to work. Open paren, closing paren. We're going to write double B. Open twisty, closing twisty. Now let's see, this is going to be width. We're going to assign B to width. Okay, so now we have both the mutators done. Now we're going to create the accessors. We're going to create two accessors, one for length and one for width. So here we're going to write double, and we're going to write get. And we're going to do length first. Open parentheses, closing parentheses, open twisty, closing twisty. Now we're going to write return length, semicolon. And that's it. Now we're going to do, again, double, get width, open paren, closing paren, open twisty, closing twisty. Now we're going to write return width, semicolon. Okay, so now we have the accessors for length and width. So now we're going to get into the facilitators. So we're going to do 3 facilitators. So we're going to do the facilitators for perimeter, perimeter, area, and diagonal. So okay, first the facilitator for perimeter, because it's the simplest. So we're going to write double perimeter, open paren, closing paren. Then we're going to write open twisty, closing twisty, indent, and return. Now we're going to solve for the perimeter. So the perimeter is equal to 2 times the length plus 2 times the width. Now you can do that and it'll work, but it's a little bit sloppy, and only because you could take out the one of the 2's to simplify it. So we could actually go put a parenthesis there, delete that 2, and the multiplication sign, and another parenthesis here. Okay, and this 2 times the length plus the width will give you the perimeter. Now, after we did the perimeter, now we're going to do the area. So we're going to do double area, open paren, closing paren, open twisty, closing twisty. We're going to write return. So the area, how do you get the area? The area is equal to length times the width. So we're just going to say length multiplied by the width. And that will solve for the area. Now, next we're going to solve for the diagonal. So we're going to type double diagonal, open paren, closing paren. Then you're going to do open twisty, closing twisty. We're going to type return. Now, how do we solve for the diagonal? Well, it would be, I think it's a squared plus b squared is equal to c squared, but we want c, which is the diagonal, which that would just be the square root of c. So we're going to do square root, and sqrt is how you get the square root, parentheses. Then we're going to say length times length plus width times width, and close it off. Oops, didn't close it. Semicolon. And that will solve for the diagonal. Now you notice that this is the square root is underlined, and it's saying it's an error. The reason that you have an error here is because we have not included the header into the int main here. So we're going to do that next. So we come here underneath using namespace. We're going to do pound include. Now we want to include our header file, so we're going to do parentheses and then rectangle h. And now it's included into our file. And so now if we come back here, you notice the square root is no longer underlined with an error. And that's just because we've included it into our int main, and int main knows that in order to use this, it has to go first to get the CMath, because that's where it's going to go look for the code on how to use this square root command. Okay, so now that we got that, now we need to include we need to create an instance of our object inside of int main. So we're going to do C rectangle. Now you can call this instant whatever you want. You can call it a happy face or whatever, but usually you want to make it something that makes sense and that it's like an intelligent word that you'll recognize right away. So if you call it 1 or 2, that's very vague, so I just call it rectangle. Okay, so now we've created an instance inside of int main. I always like to move this further down because otherwise you're going to get the press any key right after whatever you type. So we're going to do cout, and then we're going to do \n a few times. Now we can compile this just to make sure it runs. So I'm going to compile it now, and I recommend that you compile every so often, just so if you make an error somewhere, it tells you right away. Instead of, like, I wouldn't recommend if you're starting out to write all this code and not compile it first. I'd recommend like you create it in steps. So like you write a line, if you're starting out, you might want to compile it right away, or maybe like 2 or 3 lines and then compile. So I'm going to compile now just to make sure. Okay, so it was built successfully, everything's up and running. So now let's go ahead and let's print some stuff out to the screen. So we're going to say cout. Let's see, I am testing my rectangle object. Oh, let me show you 2 ways to do the cout. You can do the cout like that, Or you could do the CL like this. So \n. I think 2 lines down is fine. So I am testing my rectangle object. Now I'm going to say the length of the rectangle is. In this one, you notice that right after I finished these double quotes, I closed off this command, and that's the end of this command. Now instead of closing it off, I'm just going to use one cout, and I'm going to type in several things. So here I'm using these less than or greater than signs. So now let's see, we're going to type in, we want to get the length of the rectangle, so we're going to say rectangle dot, and then we want to get the length. So get length, and then open paren, closing paren. Now we could close it out here and stop. And that might actually be a good idea. Let's see what happens when I close it out like this. Alright, you notice that it says I am testing my rectangle object, and this one is not indented 8 spaces. Also, you'll notice you have some sort of kooky number in there, and that is totally because I did not set a value for the length. So first off, I'm going to make this a little bit neater by doing \t to make sure that it's indented so the I and the T line up. Now I'm going to enter in a value for the length. So we're going to do C, actually no, it's just rectangle dot, and now we want to set the length. So let's come down here to set length, and we're going to set the length to, let's say, 123.4. Okay, so now if we run this code now, it's going to say I am testing my rectangle object. It's going to pump out the length of the rectangle is, and it's going to give you a length of 123.4. So let's see if that's what happens. Okay, so you see now they're properly indented, and it says I am testing my rectangle object. The length of the rectangle is 123.4. Alright, so the length is correct. Now let's go ahead and check for the perimeter, area, and the diagonal, but first let's check for the width first. So we're going to do double quotes, \n, \t, the width of the rectangle is, and then let's come back here, and now we're going to call we're going to get the width of it. So we're going to say rectangle dot, oh wait, something's goofy. Oh look, see this right here? You can't put that. If you put the semicolon here, you have to add another cout here. Since I didn't add another cout, it gave me this error. So this can be fixed just by getting rid of that. Now, so see rectangle. Now let's set not set the width, but we want to get the width. And from previously, you'll know that if I just go ahead and try to run this, we're going to have problems because I did not set the width. Here I set the length, so it'll give me a length of whatever I enter in here. But since I did not set the width, I'm not going to get any value that I want for the width. It's going to give me some kooky answers. So right now I'm going to set the width. So rectangle, and then set width. Let's set it at 567.8. Okay, so now we've set the length, we've set the width. Here we're saying the length of the rectangle is, and it's going to give us the length of the rectangle here. And next, after that, we're going to say the width of the rectangle is, and then we're going to get the rectangle width here. So let's go ahead and run that. Okay, so now let's check this out. It says I am testing my rectangle object, 123.4, 567.8. Correct. So let's continue on. Now, for simplicity's sake, I'm going to call this, I'm going to set the length to 3, and I'm going to set the width. We are going to solve for the perimeter, area, and rectangle. \n, \t, the perimeter, rectangle dot, Oh, look, I did it again. I keep putting this semicolon here. Whoops. Okay, so now we're gonna do perimeter. So perimeter, open paren, closing paren. Now I'm gonna do, let's see, double quotes, backslash n, backslash n, backslash t. The area is, do rectangle dot area. Next, now we're gonna do backslash n, backslash n, backslash t. The diagonal is diagonal is it's rectangle dot diagonal. So right now we've already entered in the facilitator for diagonal, the facilitator for area, and perimeter. We also have the two accessors for length and width. So here we're just ready to go ahead and test this. We should be getting 3 for the length, 4 for the width. Perimeter should be 2 times 3, which is 6, plus 8. 6 plus 8 is 14, so we should get the perimeter of 14. The area should be 12, and the diagonal should be 9, 16, 25, 5. So the diagonal should be 5. So let's check those out right now. Okay, so the length of the rectangle is 3, the width of the rectangle is 4, the perimeter is 14, the area is 12, and the diagonal is 5. So our program checks out. Anyhow, hopefully this made sense. Hopefully it helped you out, and hopefully in your guys' project you guys get an A. So good luck in your guys' classes,